And it's going to be really revolutionary technology for initially, I think, enterprise, but it will spill into also our everyday lives and really shake up pretty much everything. I think it will be at one point the new standard of how we interact with computers, with digital technology. And again, to be at the forefront of that revolution, I mean, how can you not be excited?
We are so excited that you're joining us on the world's first podcast shot entirely in augmented reality, specifically using Sphere. The work that the XR community accomplishes is nothing short of astonishing, and we are so excited to share a peek behind the curtain with you. We've got an incredible guest lineup for our upcoming episodes. At XR Frontiers, we'll be sharing firsthand insights from the innovators that are literally building this industry, and as a result, changing the world as we know it. We'll also be joined by spatial collaboration users, digging into how they're deploying next-generation technology each and every day to revolutionize their business operations. So, if you're into all this and everything AR and VR, or just simply don't want to be left behind with the Luddites, then be sure to tune in. All right, so for our first episode, we are joined by none other than Sphere's fearless leader. Sven Brunner is the co-founder and CEO of Sphere, a company trailblazing the enterprise XR landscape. At his core, Sven is an entrepreneur, and he's driven by a go big or go home philosophy. He's firmly adamant that the reliance on 2D screens imposes significant limitations and is an obstacle to achieving success. So, as such, he's joined us today from the Bay Area via Sphere to share his vision for the future of XR and how his company is reshaping enterprise collaboration and customer engagement. Popping in from the podcast editing booth with a quick disclaimer on this episode. So, as the intro would suggest, we are shooting this podcast in augmented reality. And for the first episode, we definitely learned how not to do it, or at least I did. So originally, we recorded this episode using a MetaQuest 3, and we had Sven represented as an avatar in my view, and we had my co-host Ali call in via Sphere's guest call with her video feed represented as a hologram. And of course, if you've ever recorded anything on an XR headset, you might share my pain in that when you're wearing the headset, it looks like everything is perfectly clear and your head feels like it's staying quite still. And then you watch the recording back, and what you find is it looks like you recorded it on a Nokia phone that was rolling down a hill at a fast pace. So needless to say, learn my lesson. That being said, this episode was just too good not to share, and the insights that Sven shared with us were really incredible. There are still tons of clips of Sphere's mixed reality solution in action that you can watch throughout this recording. The good news is that we found a solution for filming the podcast in XR for our next episode, so get excited for that. And rest assured, you will get to witness the first ever podcast that was fully recorded in XR, just perhaps not today. We will spare you the nausea of the shaky feed. And that's all I have for you, so let's jump into the episode with Sven.
Hi, Sven. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Ali. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So to start off with, can you tell us a little bit more about your professional background and what led you to the field of XR technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So I studied computer science and business back in Switzerland, where I'm from. And towards the end of my college career or college time, I was kind of already playing with the thought of creating my own business. And right around that time, that was in 2016, Microsoft announced their first, or actually the first spatial computing headset in the world, the HoloLens 1 at that time. And I still remember like watching the live stream when they unveiled the HoloLens 1, Microsoft. And even though the use cases were pretty like bare bone, pretty primitive still, like just a person in a living room watching something on a big virtual screen, basically, it really captured my interest and imagination. And I really felt like this is a technology that we can really change so much with for the better. And being a lifelong sci-fi fan, that was for me immediately like something I wanted to jump on. And I see so much potential, especially the business world, right? How we could reshape collaboration and communication and just make it much easier and more efficient to collaborate and work together. And that's really what kind of sucked me into the whole space. That was kind of the starting point back then.
Very cool. I think that the love of sci-fi is something that probably connects much of the XR community together.
Yeah, I agree.
Can you tell us a bit about the early days of Sphere and what was the original vision that you had for the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the early days we started, it sounds almost like corny, but we started, like, my co-founder and I, we didn't start in a garage, but we started in like an attic of my co-founders, which was, or it still is, a very close friend of mine. We started in his mother's home in her attic, had our like little office space. And we actually kind of started as very explorative in a sense that we knew we wanted to build something with that technology, but it was so new. No one really knew exactly how it could be applied. So what we did really initially, we put a lot of emphasis on talking to a lot of potential companies and customers who could use this technology without actually an agenda, right? Just really trying to understand, to learn. And that really helped us shape then what's now known as Sphere. And I'm actually pretty happy to say that the initial vision stayed intact. It's still pretty much the same. Obviously, we developed quite a bit in all those years, right? It's nowhere close to where it was back then, but the vision stayed the same in the sense that we always try to really up level the way we, again, as I said before, to collaborate, right? Which is now a very nice testament to it. We're standing here, or we're all in a virtual collaboration room, right? And I'm talking to you as an avatar, which is pretty mind blowing. If you have told me that like 4 or 5 years ago, that we will actually be at this point, because that's what we envisioned, right? Being able to work across time, space, as naturally with someone who's like thousands, which you are, right? You're thousands of miles away now. And I can talk to you as if you were in the same room with me and collaborate, which is a really, really nice experience. And is exactly what's the vision that we had like 5-6 years ago.
Awesome. Well, speaking of vision, everybody's been talking about the Apple Vision Pro that recently hit the market. So first off, what impact do you think that the Apple Vision Pro is going to have on XR overall? And how is Sphere going to be part of that?
I mean, I think we can already see the impact, right? I mean, they sold, I think the last number I saw is 200,000 units, which is just if to put it in perspective, this is mind blowing, right? I think the lifetime HoloLens 2 sales, again, a device that arrived in 2019, is around that number, maybe 250K. So the Apple Vision Pro, even though it's not even released, right? It's coming out on February 2nd. We're recording that slightly before. Is already almost outselling existing headsets in the market, which is mind blowing, right? And it's a great sign for the entire industry. I mean, the level of excitement. I was just at CES a few weeks ago. XR, obviously, there's all this AI talk, right? Which is also there, but XR gets more attention than it ever has, I feel like, in the last few years. So I think and we also see that, I think, from a customer interest, from the readiness of these companies to adopt the technology. And I think the Apple Vision Pro will only accelerate. I think it's a very important factor because Apple is still a very trusted brand, especially here in North America or in general also in the Western world, in Asia as well. And the signal that they send going into that space and really going, not just like, tiptoeing around it, really going full in is a really, really good sign. And we at Sphere, we always have this is our core philosophy to be device agnostic, platform independent. We want to support the latest and greatest. If customers a choice, a variety to kind of pick the device that works best for them. And we're obviously also going to support the Apple Vision Pro at launch and bring also the greatest and latest of Sphere into that experience.
So speaking of that, being Apple, it's safe to assume that they're going to be heavily leaning into third-party apps in their app store in order to create content for the Apple Vision Pro. And there's a lot of companies, Zoom being one who recently announced, that are going to be porting their applications to the Vision Pro. So amongst the crowd, how is Sphere planning on differentiating itself, and why would people want to use it as a spatial collaboration solution as opposed to some of the other apps, for example, Zoom, that are going to be available on the device?
Yeah, great question. So I think there's many aspects to that, right? One is think especially you mentioned Zoom, right? We take a very spatial first approach, meaning that we really heavily incorporate the physical world into the experiences as well, right? Things like it's not just about, oh, okay, I can talk to you as an avatar, right? For us, that's just a starting point. We build a lot on top of it. To give a few examples, right? We have customers using our solution for design review, right? So you have a three-dimensional model in the middle of the room, maybe even attached to a physical model or overlaid to quickly go through different designs, which is features or leverages heavily spatial computing functionalities that some of these other applications, especially that come from like VR and so on, they don't have that. Now, on the other side, what we also have is more, I would say, then tools and functionalities that work for specific use cases also. For example, we have great tools to support collaborative training, right? Classroom style training. You have one instructor, you have students, they walk them through, or it can also be on the job, right? It doesn't always have to be students, in a collaborative way, right? To incorporate the physical world and the digital world and blend that together. I think we at Sphere, we really try to capture the needs of customers and deliver tools they need to be successful in this beyond basically just the basics of like, okay, I can talk to you. I can actually also do something in XR in a Sphere session. I think that's a big differentiator for us when we look at maybe some of these newer players that jump in now and quote unquote just provide like video calling in a 3D headset. We are actually a 3D spatial solution, not just like you can have a 2D environment or 2D experience in the 3D headset.
Okay, hello everybody, welcome back. If you did notice a little bit of a break in the editing, that's because while the experience on XR is nearly flawless, as we have with all technology, battery life is still a challenge that we face. So we're back in action, devices are all plugged in, and we are ready to get going again. Sven, how do you view the growing trend of immersive meetings in business environments? What have you seen, and what do you anticipate continuing as XR matures?
Yeah, I mean, we only want to see it more and more often, right? We're now in this, like, I think for the first time ever in a situation where like hybrid work is basically the standard now, right? You have people remotely, part-time in office. Every company has a different policy. There's still a little bit of chaos or basically, a lot of employees would rather work more remotely. A lot of companies would rather have them in office and so on. So I think it's gonna take a little bit until everything settles. But no matter what happens, I think XR is really here to solve these challenges. Because I think we all know, and everyone who has been in this situation, like especially hybrid meetings on like traditional like 2D conferencing tools are not great, to say the least. Basically, what happens is it's always some people feel left out or don't have the same experience as others. And that's really where XR meetings can shine. Everyone has the same tools available. Everyone is equal. You're whether you're remote or in person or it's a mix, it all works the same way, right? You have the same tools at your disposal. You have what we always try to highlight also, you have the entire real estate of your space as a screen, right? We're not limited to 2D screen. And you can have as much content as you want, wherever you want, be it then for reviewing 3-dimensional content, 2-dimensional content, and so on. So it benefits all sorts of meetings. And we've really seen that it leads to more engaging meetings, right? I think that's also a big challenge, right? In these like 6-hour long, or every day you're in 6 or 7 hours on Zoom calls. We all know Zoom fatigue is real.
Or podcasts.
Or podcast. We all know that's real. And in XR, it's just way more engaging. It feels so much more natural, right? I can move freely. I can actually walk around. I don't need to sit in front of a computer all the time. I mean, I can still sit, obviously, but I can also walk around, which is nice, which I'm doing right now, right? I can move a little bit. It's much more freeing, the experience. I can look around. The entire room is what I can work with. And it feels so much more natural, so much more engaging. And it just feels like I'm just in a room talking to my colleagues rather than being on a call and being constantly distracted also with other windows that pop up on my PC. Right here, I can focus. I'm in this session and I can talk to my colleagues. What we're also kind of pursuing, this is like a new concept we're going into, is what's also already a lot of interest, is a concept we call XR meeting rooms or XR boardrooms. So basically, we actively help companies equip their kind of legacy meeting rooms with XR equipment, XR headsets, Sphere installed on it. Employees can just go in, put the headsets on, and join a collaborative session, which is really helpful and helps a lot of companies, even though they maybe don't have personal devices for every single employee yet. I think this is hopefully where we're going in a few years, but it's already super powerful for really when you really need it most, for workshops, for product presentations, maybe also have a conversation with very important stakeholders. That's also where these XR meeting rooms come into place, like a fully furnished room, everything set up, put the device on, jump right in, and you're in the middle of the meeting. Now, one thing I would also like to add, because we get that question a lot, right? Are you guys trying to replace Zoom? Are you guys trying to replace Teams? And the answer is clearly no. We're not trying to replace any of that. We're trying to enhance it, meaning that even today already, Sphere has a full integration into Teams, meaning that anyone on a Teams client, completely vanilla Teams client, no add-on needs to be installed or anything, can join any Sphere session. From Sphere, you can call in any Teams user as well. So that's also a very important principle for us to really make sure everyone can participate, right? No one is excluded. We do know that not every single employee has a headset yet. We are also aware that, a lot of people, and there's still room obviously for these conferencing tools, right? If we're discussing spreadsheets, even in Sphere internally, we're jumping on a Teams or a Zoom call, and we don't want to replace that, but we want to bring these for the cases where it makes more sense, bring people in XR, but don't exclude people who work on their Zoom or Teams clients as well.
That makes a lot of sense, especially for the people who are maybe a little bit more hesitant to adopt XR. It's a bit of a rung in the ladder rather than expecting them to scale the entire floor.
Absolutely.
That being said, there are a lot of people who are going to say that XR doesn't achieve this immersiveness that people who are fans of this technology feel. They maybe resist the fact that the headsets can be heavy and that it's a new technology that they have to learn. The fact that for some users, it's not as feature rich as they perceive their other applications to be. What would you have to say to those people who are skeptics about XR and about the impact that it can have on their collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, if you mentioned a few things, let me maybe unpack a few of them. I think one that definitely is a factor is a lot of people haven't really tried it, right? There's a lot of people who, which is true for a lot of things, not just XR, but they complain about something they haven't really experienced themselves, right? Or they have like an outdated experience, which I think is true for a lot of people, right? When the first headsets came out in 2015, 2016, spatial computing headsets, they were very clunky still. They were heavy. The experience was not great yet, but they already showed the potential, the promise of what this technology can do. And I think a lot of people informed their opinions back then and didn't really kind of catch up or try to catch up with what's actually happening in the market. And a lot of people don't realize in the last 1 or 2 years, there's been major shifts in this industry. The headsets have gone or become so much better, right? We quickly touch on Apple Vision Pro, but there's other devices out there, Magic Leap, the Quest 3, the Lenovo devices. They're very comfortable to wear. The form factors are much, much smaller. The computational power is much, much better. And obviously also software got better, right? Sphere is not the same Sphere as it was 4 years ago. It's vastly improved. And, that's with any new technology, right? At the beginning, it's obviously a bit clunky. Sometimes people forget how it was in the smartphone era or cell phone era back then, right? We all had the huge, massive Nokias. I think everyone probably, at least I'm from Europe, we all had Nokias. But that was kind of the standard, right? And it was very far away from an iPhone or a Samsung Galaxy today. And I think in XR, that was also the start, right? It was clunky, but now we're already, or I would really say now in 2023, 2024 is really the time now where you can really use XR productively, flawlessly, and it actually has an impact. And we also see that a lot, that customer recognize that, right? I think there's also maybe a bit of misconception sometimes in the press that they feel like, oh, it's just a pipe dream. No one is actually using that, which is not true. And I think that's also why we're trying to spread the word, why we're recording these podcasts and a lot of other things we're doing to show the world, hey, it's not just a dream. It's here. You can use it. It provides value, and it can solve the unique challenges that we have. We talked about the whole hybrid work situation, which a lot of companies feel that's a crisis for them. They don't really know how to navigate it. I mean, even we faced it as a startup at Sphere, right? A fast-growing and mighty startup, but even for us, we had to navigate that, right? People are spread all across the world between hybrid and in person, and these challenges, and a lot of companies trying to solve them, and we firmly believe that XR is very much a part of the answer, if not the answer to solve that problem in general. But it will take time a little bit. But for any skeptics, I would just invite them, hey, jump with us on a Sphere call or in a Sphere session, experience it yourself, and then make your judgment after that. That's kind of what I maybe would as a recommendation.
Well, the nice thing on that note too is they can try Sphere for free with the product's new free tier. So they don't even need to go through the entire sales process to see if it works for them.
Exactly. Yeah, that's something we intentionally wanted to do because there's still a lot of friction in getting XR into your hands, right? You need to think about the headset, the hardware, you need to think about the software, what's the licensing, and so on. And we want to make it super seamless. So basically, you download Sphere, jump right in. It's like a very, very short onboarding. Like I think it's an email address and your name, and that's it. You're in, and you can already play around with all the tools. We have a lot of stock content that you can experience Sphere. You can even jump into sessions and really try it out for yourself and see the value it provides. That's a very exciting initiative, and we're also very proud to have that to really help, again, as we said before, right, spread the word, make the world see what this technology can do.
So you mentioned friction with the adoption of XR. Of course, that's something that people can feel across industries with lots of technologies, but XR being so new to many businesses can feel like it's even more of a hurdle to get into. Certainly the free tier helps, but once we're looking at large enterprise deployments, what are some of the technical adoption challenges that these companies face when implementing XR technology into their businesses? And just to add to that, how has Sphere specifically addressed those challenges, and how do you see this improving as we move forward?
Yeah, and I think that was a big hurdle for, and still is for a lot of players in this space, that selling or then going into large enterprises is not easy, right? It's not the same as you have like a consumer app and you download it and have fun for 10 minutes and it's a very easy way to get in, right? In enterprise, I would say maybe highlight two things. One is connectivity, and the other one is security. I think that's the two really big ones that especially large enterprises look into, right? A lot of people think about the features, what the solution can do, and obviously that's super important, right? We also want to provide value. The features are the ones then that provide actual value to the end user. But in the buying process, in the adoption process, what's equally important is, first of all, how can they adopt the solution internally? How can they deploy it, right? What's the mechanisms for that? Can you comply with the super restricted firewall rules that these companies have, right? We're here talking about a new type of solution, right? A lot of what we're doing is real time, right? I'm talking to you in real time to a lifelike avatar. We have 3-dimensional content that is synchronized in real time. And a lot of companies or their IT teams have not seen an application like that, right? Which is new for them. So we invested a lot of time and effort to make it really easy and compliant with their network rules, right? I'm not going into the details. I don't want to bore the audience with like technical details, but it's a lot, right? You're extremely restricted.
What do you mean? Security is such a fun topic.
Yeah, exactly, right. It's the thing, right? It's not something you usually see people talking about on LinkedIn or social media because it seems a little bit, quote unquote, boring, but it's insanely important, right? Especially for these large companies. As I said, I would say feature set and these aspects are equally important. Same with security in general, right? Like we're actually in the process of being SOC 2 and ISO certified. And we really have always had an emphasis on having a secure solution, right? Enterprise grade, right? A lot of tools are more like a bit on the gamey side or the entertainment side. And we also want to make the experience fun, right? Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. That's a big piece for us too, right? It should also be more fun to work in Sphere than on traditional productivity apps. But that doesn't mean we compromise security from an IT perspective, right? Everything we have state-of-the-art encryptions, right, for any communication, for any file traffic. We've also been reviewed and passed the foundational technical review by AWS, one of our key cloud partner. So that's all things we heavily invested in over the last few years, and that's really something that is key. And again, for us is also we have a lot of big brand names as customers, and they wouldn't trust us if they wouldn't have seen that we made these efforts. They obviously also have their own security reviews that we always have to pass. And I can really proudly say that we haven't failed any of them. We even sometimes pass ones that very large companies sometimes fail. And that's definitely something that for our engineering team is a big testament of what we have achieved, and that we're really ready for enterprise adoption.
That's awesome. And, you mentioned that we have some very large customers that we've deployed Sphere for. And can you give me an example of one of the ways that Sphere is actively being used within an enterprise setting and what that use case looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one, for example, an interesting one, we touched on that a little bit, is, for example, for car design or design review, right? We have, for example, the French car manufacturer Renault, and they're using it for car design, meaning you have a half-built physical prototype car in the middle of the room. You bring in your engineers and designers, and they overlay their latest virtual 3D models on top of that half-built prototype car, right? Iterate through designs, right? Different variants, different colors, different sizes, and really actively design engineer in Sphere in real time. And again, people can be on site, or you can even bring in people remotely, and they're an avatar, but they still see the same content as the people on site. So that would be one example. Another one where we're getting actually a lot of traction is however you want to call it, training, upskilling for, let's say, technicians. You have then, and we touched on that a little bit as well before, right? You have this classroom style training. You have like an instructor or a teacher or whatever it may be. You probably have a physical equipment, and you walk the class or the students or the trainees through the procedure step by step, and really show them what needs to be done, right? We support that with 3D models, with audio visuals, being PDFs or videos, and you see exactly where the step needs to be conducted. All the data is collected and create a report automatically for the customer. So that's kind of a use case we, for example, also have in pharma. Pfizer is a customer of ours that uses in that capacity. Mm-hmm. And one use case I always really like to highlight is that we're working with a healthcare institute. It's the University Clinic Heidelberg in Germany. And we're actually helping them combat violence against children, which is always, again, obviously it's not good that this use case even has to exist. Unfortunately, it does. But it still makes me always very happy to see that we can support these doctors and the children, right, and make their lives easier by basically using our remote assistance functionality in our app, that basically a local doctor can assess a child, whether it's been abused or not, right? That sometimes they come in the middle of the night with bruises, their parents, right? And you want to make the right call. You don't want to send the child back if it's actually being abused, but you also don't want to accuse anybody of child abuse, which is a very serious accusation. And in a lot of cases, or almost in all cases, these local doctors lack the experience and the knowledge to make that assessment. And traditionally, they would then have a specialist from, let's say, this Heidelberg University Clinic. They would have to travel hundreds of miles potentially in the middle of the night and assess that patient, right? Which is painful for everyone involved, right? Child, parents, they have to wait, the local doctor, it's a tense situation, not great. And what happens now is basically the local doctor puts a headset on with Sphere, calls in the remote expert, which is then the specialist from the University of Heidelberg, and they assess the patient together. Saves time. They don't have to drive there. It's much less invasive for both the parents and the child, and they can make the call much, much faster and quicker. And it's been a huge success story. We're rolling that out to more clinics all over Germany. This is one of my, again, favorite ways how Sphere can really support people and make their lives better, right? I think I usually also like to say that, right? A lot of times people see technology as a threat, as something that makes lives harder or more difficult and so on. And there's an element to that sometimes in technology, but I think these cases also really show how technology can be used for the better to improve people's lives.
Yeah, I think some people see technology as a threat, both in the sense that it can make life harder. Technology is harder to use, but also in the fact that it replaces people. That's a lot of the criticism of AI, especially within education, as one example. And in the corporate world, that it replaces critical thought and therefore replaces humans. Whereas it sounds like with XR, the human is still at the center of the story. They just have access to resources that allow them to do their jobs more effectively.
Absolutely. That's what I love so much about this technology, right? It's really, it's very human centric, right? Which a lot of other technology is more like, okay, it's about the technology itself. And XR is always, I mean, we talk about, it's a person with a headset or a phone that experiences this. And it's always about enriching the person's capabilities, making supercharging the person, giving them superpowers, right? We sometimes, especially with things we're developing, we sometimes use the analogy of Jarvis, the Iron Man, basically the visual helper. But I think that's actually much closer to where we're going with our technology than maybe others, right? We really try to make a person more powerful with what they can do, give them just more power at their fingertips, so to say. And it's never about replacing them, right? Our at least XR is never ever about replacing someone, because you need the human to perform the task, right? Of course, we want to make them more efficient, we want to make them faster, we want to help them be trained up quicker, make collaboration, communication faster, more efficient. But it's always about enhancing your experience, not replacing human, which again is something I really like about this technology, because I'm a big fan of natural interaction, of human interaction, right? I don't believe we should transfer all of that to robots. And I think that the other thing that we also have
just the avatars.
Just the avatars, exactly. Good point. That's a fair catch. No, but it's, again, even now, right? I feel like I'm talking to a person, right? I'm not talking to like a lifeless robot. It's you, right? It may not look like you, at least not now. We're maybe talk about that later, what kind of plans we have on our avatar system.
Yes,
I still yeah, you do have hair in real life. Me too, by the way, in case you're wondering. But it still feels very lifelike, right? I still feel like I'm talking to an actual person. And again, it's me in the center, it's you in the center. So it's a very human centric technology.
For sure.
Yeah, and we touched on a few things here that I would definitely like to get to. AI being one of them, our avatar systems is another. But before we move away from the healthcare use case altogether, we are talking about technology that can replace people. Obviously, one that it can't replace, at least not today, very effectively, are doctors and healthcare providers. So something that really strikes me, being based in Canada, where I'm calling from, is healthcare isn't accessible in rural and remote locations in large countries like Canada. And this is a big issue for our government, for our country overall, especially with an aging population. And something like Sphere and something like XR could really help to solve this problem through making doctors more accessible across the country via XR in realistic ways that right now we really can't simulate with alternative technologies.
Absolutely. And I think for me, it was a bit like, I'm from Switzerland, which is a super small country. And we didn't really have that problem. We have like great hospitals, always like, I don't know, 15 minutes away from where people live. But when I moved to the US, I'm calling now from the San Francisco Bay Area, or joining that session. And you mentioned Canada, right, which are vast, large countries, not so densely populated. Even some other countries in Europe, right, France, Germany. I mean, we made the example of Germany. This is also the case, right, where you really have this need of, and you mentioned it, right, there's not enough doctors for an aging population, right? And this will only get quote unquote worse, right, over the next few years. People get older and older. And, doctors are not just magically popping up. So I think we really, and a lot of also, like, we see that in governments and local governments and cities, they really try to invest in, hey, how can we solve that problem, right? How can we provide patient care to, as you said, more rural or remote areas? Because it's just not realistic to have, like, in all these places, a specialist for everything, right? That's just not going to happen. And yeah, that's exactly one use case we heavily lead into. And I think Sphere is a perfect solution to solve this issue and this problem.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And I think that's something that even people who don't currently work within the XR industry or aren't an XR user can wrap their heads around and can really see the massive benefit of that use case. So circling back to everybody's favorite topic, or at least was everybody's favorite topic in 2023, and I think will continue to be this year, AI. How is Sphere planning on using AI within its technology, if at all? And what do you see that looking like as the year progresses and moving into the future?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I'm I'm in agreement with you. It's like, again, judging from CES, the AI hype is far from over. But I think we're transitioning into, which I think is interesting now. And last year, 2023, especially early 2023, OpenAI released ChatGPT, and everyone went crazy, right? Everyone was like, "Oh wow, that's amazing! I've never seen something like that." And then as the year progressed, I think a lot of people were like, "Well, okay, and what now?" Right? What do we do with this? I mean, it's cool, right? It helps me, like, I don't know, rewrite an email or help me correct a blog post that I'm writing. But is that it, right? What more can we do with it? And I think this is now 2024 will be, in general, for AI, more of a year where it's really being applied and used in actual products. And I see AI as a very foundational technology, right? Like AI, right? Like the internet. It's not necessarily it's a foundational thing that you need to incorporate into something, right? It's not like you're using the internet. You're going on a website on the internet or using an application on the web on the internet. And I think the same will happen to AI. And now, like, say, to talk about Sphere and AI, we have very big plans with AI, because in general, we at Sphere believe, and I'm a big believer into that XR is the perfect vessel for AI. Mostly at the moment, people consume it through chat. You have a chat window on 2D, you type text and you get text back. I mean, some of them are only multi-modal, right? You can put an image in, things like that. But it's still, like, sometimes even a bit weird when you think about this is how it was like in the 90s, right? We had like these textual-based, you had MS-DOS, and then like even games back in the day were text-based. And I think with AI, we're also in that stage, but this will now change very, very fast, right? Then XR has a critical role to play in there, because what we have in XR, we can use our hands, right? I mean, I don't have anything else in my hands. I can control the entire application with my hands, with my voice, and with my eyes, right? We can look around. And these inputs we can feed into AI, into large language models, right? And that makes it all more powerful. I can't really say yet what we're exactly working on. It's still a bit under wraps, but I can just hint that it's going to be really, really interesting. Again, take the hint with Jarvis. It's going that direction. That's kind of where we're going to. Or maybe to give you just a quick example, as a bit of a teaser, right? Just imagine, instead of, like, as you do it maybe today, you go to ChatGPT and ask it a question. You're in an XR headset. You just look at something and are able to ask a question about it, and get relevant data for it just by looking at it, right? Because we have the eyes in XR. You can say something, you can use your voice, you can even point at things, and we can detect that. And that's an all input that we can put into LLMs. And probably not surprising for the audience, us being an enterprise-focused companies, we're not going to necessarily tap into something that has a lot of, like, consumer data. We want to obviously make sure that companies can use their corporate data to be incorporated with AI. But I'm saying a bit vague here intentionally, because there's going to be a lot of, like, announcements in the next few weeks and months on what we're going to present and work on over this year. But it's exciting. It's honestly, for me, one of the most exciting initiatives we currently work on the product side with Sphere. And I really do believe this is going to be a game changer for how we work, how we collaborate, by combining really XR and AI into one very, very powerful production tool.
Very exciting.
Awesome. Well, I mean, you can certainly see how that would change the world. The amount of information that we would have access to is absolutely mind-blowing. We have access to that now. I mean, obviously on our phones, in our pocket, but that doesn't give you the contextually relevant 3D space, which XR brings. And that's a game changer.
Exactly.
So just to wrap it up here, I want to be cognizant of your time, Sven. I know you're a very busy guy. what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs who are looking to venture into the XR space? Let's split this question into two pieces. What advice would you give to developers looking to join the XR industry? And secondly, what advice would you give to users who are thinking that it would be beneficial for them to get into XR and aren't too sure where to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, developers, obviously, I would encourage them to first apply for a job at Sphere before they develop their own application. we don't want more competition. No, jokes aside. So I always encourage everyone to not just XR, but if they have an idea and want to try out something, being a founder, being an entrepreneur, I always tell them go for it. Because like life's too short to not try things, and it can be a very exciting, thrilling ride. There's a lot of ups and downs. That's also what I always tell people. Don't expect it's going to be smooth sailing. If you're not in it for the ride, right? It's going to be, the lows are very low, the highs are very high, but you got to be prepared for that, right? Failure is an option, especially in XR, right? We've seen a lot of startups and companies come and go. I think we've been one of the longest standing ones, actually, even though we're only like 5 years old as a company, or 6 years old now. But this is something that people just need to be aware of. It's a hard business still, in terms of like the technological challenges are real. You're not, it's not as smooth as if you develop for a mobile phone or a web application. It's much more difficult. There's much more challenges, right? I always also describe a little bit, it's still in between like traditional SaaS and deep tech, right? It's still somewhere in the middle, because it's very, very involved, but it's also extremely fun. It's very satisfying to really see things come to life. I'm also a very visual person, and being able to create solutions that are inherently visual, right? It's still so magical for me to project a 3D hologram into the physical world, right? I mean, I've been dreaming of that since I watched Star Wars as like, I don't know, a 7-year-old, to that power and to be able to do that. And that's so rewarding, right? And I think if you have a little tiny bit of sci-fi love in you, and you're a software developer, it's like one of the most satisfying things you can do. So I would say, go for it. Just be prepared. It's going to be tough, and you're going to have to work a lot. But again, the other thing I made a joke initially, but the other option is really, and we get a lot of people like that who apply. They're very enthusiastic about the space. And actually, I had this with actually 2 current employees who told me, when I asked them, "Hey, why do you want to join Sphere?" And they're now employees, but during the process, the application process, the interview process, and they said, "Well, basically, I wanted to create my own company, but then I found that you guys are actually exactly doing what I also would want to do, and why then you guys are so much ahead, then I just join you." And that's also really cool to hear, right? That we inspire people that they're like, "Oh, this is so cool. That's actually just something I would want to create myself." And they bring this entrepreneurial spirit into our company as employees. And I think that also makes for a great team. So that's kind of, I encourage someone listens to this and is a big enthusiast. Shoot us an email. We're always happy to hear from people that like the space, or also interested to collaborating and working with us. And then on the user side, I would say, a good starting point, we talk about the free tier, right? Test it out, right? I would really say, especially if you're skeptical, can I use it? Can I not use it? I mean, you can also read all the million blog posts and things like that. That's good. That's helpful, right? It helps you to be informed. But I think to really, really understand this technology, go try it. And I think actually a good example is also, I think Apple is actually offering that now in every Apple store, experiences with the Apple Vision Pro, but they're not alone, right? There's a lot of device makers who offer these experiences. You can get one of them. You can also reach out to us. Obviously, we're more than happy to facilitate that. But for me, it's really something that you should experience if you can. That's a big deal. Especially if you're unsure and you're like, is that really something? Experience it. And I think more often than not, people are starting to be actual believers in the technology and see the potential after they've tried it.
For sure. Also, from my perspective, seeing videos of XR or even Sphere, experiencing it actually on the headset in real life is like night and day. Even if it looks really cool in the video, you just can't replace actually seeing it in 3-dimensional space.
Exactly. 100%.
Speaking as a Sphere employee myself, something that I've really enjoyed is whenever I'm inviting friends over or speaking with my family about what it is I do for work, it's something I actually want to show them. I want to put them in a headset. I want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. To work in an industry in a role where you're so excited to share it with everybody around you, and you can actually show them something tangible that's more interesting than, you know, what you'd find on an Excel sheet or whatever other people do for work. Sorry, other people.
You broke the heart of every like financial analyst and accountant out there.
I'm in marketing. I couldn't be further from a finance person. But no, it's an exciting industry to work in, of course. And then to be a user and to get exposure to this, it's like you get to be part of it as well. Even if you're working in finance, imagine getting to look at your data rather than on an Excel sheet in 3D in really incredible visual ways, having your graphs just come to life around you rather than being on a flat 2D screen. Getting the exposure, not just from the industry, but as a user as well, it's exciting. It's a lot of fun to be part of.
Fully agree.
So as a final question to wrap it up, as the CEO and co-founder of one of the longest standing XR software companies out there, are there any key lessons that you've learned from your journey with Sphere that you would like to share with our audience?
Oh, there were many. I think which is I think also a good thing. You go into a bit naive because I think if you knew what's going to come to you as a founder, maybe you wouldn't even do it, right? So this naivete at the beginning is actually good, and then you learn a lot along the way, right? About yourself, about what you're good at, where you're maybe also not so good at, where you need help, and where you really excel, and that's been extremely fulfilling also from just a personal experience, right? To really see all of that. I mean, to make one example, what I completely underestimated is, I was thinking about the technical challenges at the beginning. I was thinking about the go-to-market strategy. How do we sell? Who do we sell to? Segmenting customers and so on. But I really didn't think about so much is like, okay, how do you develop a strong team? How do you manage people, right? And for me, I was like, that comes naturally. And that was a big awakening for me. Like, that's actually probably one or the biggest part of my job today is dealing with people, being it internally, but also stakeholders like investors, customers, partners, which is also a lot of fun. I like it, but that's what's something that I did not anticipate. So I think it's but it can also be the other way around, right? Depending on what background you have and you jump into something like that, it may change over time, or like, the challenges change and you may not have been prepared for this or that. So I think what's really important is adaptability, right? That's a lot of when I also people talk to me about what's the most important quality of a founder or a CEO, especially in a immersive space or emerging technology space. It's, I think, adaptability, really to be able to adapt to trends, to what's changing. I mean, I since I've been in this industry, like this industry changed like 7 times already, and new things came up and went away, and that's really, really important to stay on top of things, see trends, jump on the right ones. Not every trend is worth jumping on immediately. So you have to be very strategic about it, be adaptable, right? And I think that's also why smaller startups in this space have more success than maybe the very, very large ones, because we can, right? We're more agile, we can react quickly. A very large company takes them a massive amount of time to, we always have this analogy of like, big companies are big boats, right? And small companies are agile, smaller boats, which is true. Especially, I think, in a space like that, it's almost better to be a startup because you can react quicker to trends and change. And that's actually something that our customers really value. We're very quick in adopting new developments, bringing that in. Again, Apple Vision Pro is a good example, right? It's something that we're going to support from day one, and so on. So that I would really say. That's kind of the key thing also that I've learned is the key skill to either have or develop or sharpen to be adaptable, both as a person that obviously then translates into the whole organization.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, Sven, after all of these years with Sphere, obviously there's been a lot of ups and downs, but through those challenging times, what kept you and the company going? Why did you believe in Sphere and this technology so much that you're able to overcome these challenges?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And to be very blunt, that sometimes I had to like ask that myself, right? When as I said, the lows are low, right? And then you need to ask yourself that, hey, why am I doing this even? What's the end game? Where are we going? But for me, it was always to see the massive promise of this technology. And what always kept me going is like to see it then actually in the hands of customers and people, right? Because for me, it was always the worst. I remember as a college student, right? You write all these like term papers and theses, and they end up in a drawer and no one ever cares. And that was for me the most frustrating thing. I think a lot of people even have this experience in large companies, right? They do something, but they don't feel like it has an impact. And that for me was the thing that got me going, got me started, got me continuing. And it's still what gets me going every day now, to see that our tool has a real world impact. We do. I mean, I mentioned this case with Heidelberg. That's the most rewarding thing I think for a founder to see the product you had envisioned 5-6 years ago, just in your head, to see it then actually helping people, supporting their how they work and collaborate, and in this case even like actually having a very positive impact on children, on patients. I would say that's the most rewarding thing. And that's maybe also to the question before, if you just want to go in for the money, don't do it, right? It's not, there's way easier to make money in other areas, or in other you don't have to be a founder or a startup founder. You got to be passionate about what you're doing, what you want to achieve. I think that's still something that I have. I love this technology. I mean, and the interesting thing is also we're at the very, very beginning, right? This is just the start. The possibilities are almost endless, right? I mean, we probably also going to show you, the audience, more over this year what we're working on, what's coming. But it's extremely exciting, right? I think the notion that like, okay, this is not a cap, it couldn't be further from the truth. We're just getting started, both as an industry, but also Sphere. And it's going to be really, really, really revolutionary technology for initially, I think, enterprise, but it will spill into also our everyday lives and going to really shake up pretty much everything. I think it will be at one point the new standard of how we interact with computers, with digital technology. And again, to be at the forefront of that revolution, I mean, how can you not be excited?
I'm excited personally. What about you, Maddie?
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sven, for being part of our very first XR Frontiers podcast. Really appreciate the insights that you shared. And I know there's a lot of incredible things coming out with Sphere this year. We're definitely going to have you back on to tell us more about the AI integration once you're able to share more. But for today, really appreciate you being here. And looking forward to what comes from Sphere and from you and from XR overall.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you very much, Ali. Thank you very much, Maddie, for having me. I'm glad you're letting me come back. So I didn't completely tank it. That's good. But no, I'm excited. Thank you very much. And again, also for the audience, right? This is the very first podcast, I think, in the world that's been recorded like that. We're also very curious to hear then your thoughts and what we could do better, what worked, what didn't work. But it was a very exciting and fun experience. So thank you very much.
Thank you as well.
All right. And that is a wrap on the very first episode of the XR Frontiers podcast. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed it. It's been a journey for us. If this podcast has left you curious about Sphere and you want to try it for yourself, the good news is that you can. You can access Sphere's free tier by going to www.sphere.tech and clicking the Try Sphere free button on the homepage. It's easy to get started, and it comes packed with lots of powerful features that we think you'll love for collaborating in XR. Check it out and let us know what you think. And if you enjoyed this episode with Sven and you're wondering where you can find him, he's on LinkedIn under Sven Brunner, where he posts regular updates about Sphere and the XR industry. You can find the link in the show notes below, along with how to access Sphere's free tier. Thank you so much for listening, and we're excited to see you next time.